Hello everyone, Rich Hagan here at the news desk, sitting alongside Ian Duke from Inside R&D. Now Ian, first question, there are plenty of people inside R&D who don't necessarily work on each new set because they're doing things for sets in a year's time, 2 years' time, special projects off to the side. Were you involved in Oath of the Gatewatch?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was the lead developer on Oath of the Gatewatch, which means I was in charge of the final design and the balanced design of Oath of the Gatewatch.
So that's sort of phase two. There's sort of design, it comes up first, and there's sort of pre-design before even that.
Right.
But then, so you're at the back end, at the sharp end of, you're almost the last hands on the set before it goes out of the door.
That's right. So Ethan Fleischer and his design team handed off their initial design of the set to my team and I, and then we worked on sort of executing on their vision, working on game balance and things like that, generally making the set as fun as possible to play.
Okay, well, we have a preview for you coming up in just a little bit. But for those of you who aren't quite sure, how did we get to this point? And what's Oath of the Gatewatch going to be all about? Well, here is the story so far.
If you're just tuning in, you may get the sense that Zendikar has a deep history. You may not know what it is. So I'm going to try to get you up to speed.
So first question, what are the Eldrazi? The Eldrazi are these interplanar beings that exist in the multiverse. There are 3 titans, Eldrazi titans, and they consume planes.
6,000 years ago, 3 planeswalkers, Sorin, Ugin, and Nahiri, trapped the 3 Eldrazi titans on Zendikar. That's Ulamog, Kozilek, and Emrakul.
All 3 of the titans were lured to the plane with these hedrons, trapped and bound in this prison.
It worked. Flash forward 5,000 years, the Eldrazi nearly escape. They wreak havoc on the plane, and Nahiri, who'd been serving as the plane's guardian, vanishes.
Present day-ish, we have 3 planeswalkers who arrive at the Eye of Ugin. We have Sarkhan Volt, Chandra Nalaar, and Jace Beleren, who accidentally play a role in releasing the Eldrazi Titan.
There's still one failsafe left, though, and Sorin Markov, one of the 3 who trapped the Eldrazi originally, comes to ensure that it remains in place. The elf planeswalker Nissa Ravain is traveling with him. She thinks that by releasing this final failsafe, she will release the Eldrazi and they will leave her world alone. Tragically, she is wrong. So against Sorin's wishes, she releases this final failsafe, but the Eldrazi stick around.
Okay, so now we are up to the point of Rise of the Eldrazi. Eldrazi are taking over Zendikar. Oh my god, this is terrible. There's spawn all over the place. Nobody knows what's happening.
Emrakul and Kozilek are not seen for some time. Ulamog re-emerges as the primary threat to the plane. So in Battle for Zendikar, we see some of the planeswalkers who have fought the Eldrazi in the past returning to try to make good on things.
Gideon has come with Jace for help. And he has this idea that they'll be able to use the hedrons to somehow fight the Eldrazi. Jace goes to the Eye of Ugin. He knows where that was. He was there. And he happens to run into Ugin himself. Who would have thought? Well, the dragon is back thanks to Sarkhan Vol, which we saw in Dragons of Tarkir. So Ugin is there, and he says, well, okay, let's rethink this. Don't destroy them. I want to retrap them. This is how you can do it. He gives Jace the information Jace needs. Jace goes back to meet Gideon, who is now joined by Kiora and also Nissa.
They fight the Eldrazi. They determine that they can use the hedrons and the ley lines that are left over from the original trapping of the Eldrazi, these stone structures, to re-trap Ulamog.
They do it. They somehow succeed. These planeswalkers have come together. The Zendikari have come together. They build this ring of hedrons. It powers up. They're like, oh my god, we got this Eldrazi Titan. For the first time ever, I think we're going to win this thing. And then the ground starts to rumble. And the earth starts to quake. And then a second Eldrazi Titan emerges from under the ground. These obsidian shards. And who is it? It's Kozilek.
And that's where Oath of the Gatewatch begins.
And that is where Oath of the Gatewatch begins. Ian Duke, what have you got to show us today?
So, as we heard, Battle for Zendikar was largely about the devastation wrought by Ulamog and how the Zendikari rose up against that menace. Oath of the Gatewatch, we have the emergence of a new Titan, Kozilek. So let's take a look at the big guy himself.
All right, so here comes Kozilek, the Great Distortion. Walk us through Kozilek.
So another awesome, huge Eldrazi Titan, just like Ulamog. He's a 10 mana, 12/12 legendary Eldrazi creature with Menace. When you cast Kozilek, you get to draw up until you have 7 cards in your hand, and then he has an ability where you can discard cards from your hand to counter your opponent's spell, use them to protect Kozilek or disrupt your opponent's game plan until he can win the game. So hugely powerful, awesome Eldrazi. I'm excited to see players maybe incorporate this into their Eldrazi ramp decks.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of things going on that card. Especially that bottom bit, there's going to be a lot of sort of interactions there where you're going to end up, if you draw 3 extra cards, 4 extra cards maybe, and you're suddenly going, well, I've got a 2 and a 3 and a 5 and a 7, but do I want to discard my 7 to counter your 7? Well, probably I do, but maybe my 7 trumps your 7. There's some really, it seems like some awesome gameplay around that.
Oh, yeah, very awesome. Your opponent never knows if you have the right converted mana cost to counter their spells. And it's just a great top-end drop to refill your hand in a ramp deck, which often spends a lot of its cards getting up to 10 mana in the first place.
And then Menace, another variation on the theme of Annihilator in a way that when it's not actually that, but it just make sure that a little token can't just pop it in the way.
Exactly. It means if your opponent wants to defend themselves with creatures, they are probably throwing away 2 creatures every turn to Kozilek's attack.
Okay. I'm not even going to talk about 12-12 because I'm going to go to the other end of the card. Up the top there, Kozilek, the Great Distortion, 8 something.
Oh, yeah, I almost forgot. So up there in the upper right-hand corner of that card is Magic's new colorless mana symbol. So this is a new sort of visual technology we're introducing here with Oath of the Gatewatch. This is the new colorless mana symbol. Going forward in Magic, any sort of spell or permanent that produces colorless mana is going to use this symbol as 1 unit of colorless mana.
Okay.
On top of that, Oath of the Gatewatch in particular will have cards and abilities that cost colorless mana to use. So in order to cast Kozilek the Great Distortion, you need to spend 8 generic mana, which means mana of any color or colorless mana, but you must also spend 2 colorless mana in order to cast this card.
All right, so let's talk about where colorless mana comes from traditionally and moving forward. Here's a simple one. Am I right that Kozilek's Channeler, it taps for 2 colorless mana? That represents those 2 symbols on the top of Kozilek.
Exactly. And
in fact, it's kind of channeling Kozilek, one might say.
Yeah, those 2 cards line up in a pleasing way for sure. But it's not just that. If you had any sort of card throughout Magic's history, going forward or backward, that produces colorless mana, that also works to pay for that cost.
So there are lots of specialist lands that sometimes tap for colored, but other times are tapping for colorless. So you know, things like, I don't know, maybe Ghost Quarter would work. Things like the Urza's lands, right?
Sure, absolutely.
They give you colorless mana, so that is the symbol. And so the actual cards don't need the symbol on them, right? Because your old cards obviously don't have that. But that's not a problem. As long as they are colorless mana, you get to do that.
Right, so in some sense, nothing new is being introduced here or changed. It's just that we're using the symbol to represent 1 unit of colorless mana. And the new thing with Oath of the Gatewatch is that some cards and abilities will cost colorless mana, will require you to pay for them with colorless mana. So that's the new thing here.
Okay, so that seems fair enough. Are we going to have plenty of ways in Oath of the Gatewatch to find our colorless mana? Because it's all very well saying Kozilek's Channeler and it's common, but nonetheless, you're not going to open that many of them in a draft, and a lot of players in a draft aren't going to have colorless mana producers, or are they? How's that going to work?
Right, so with Oath of the Gatewatch, we made sure to give you plenty of different ways to produce this colorless mana to cast these Eldrazi spells. And that brings us actually to one of our other new preview cards here coming up.
Okay, so why don't we take a look? What are you going to show us next?
This is Wastes.
Wow.
So this is a brand new basic land that taps for colorless mana that you can use to cast cards like Kozilek.
Ha. Yeah, now, in theory, that's a really simple card, but that is incredibly important in terms of where Magic has been historically and where it may be going. Tell me about type. It says basic land, but it doesn't say basic land - forest, obviously.
That's right.
So what's going on there?
So this is the first time ever in Magic's history that there is a new basic land beyond the standard 5, plains, island, swamp, mountain, and forest. However, Wastes does not have a basic land type.
Right.
So there are still only 5 different types of lands for purposes of a cards like Tribal Flames, for example.
So the domain cards.
Yeah, there are still only 5 different types of basic lands, but Wastes is a new basic land. So what does that mean? Well, basic, first of all, means you can play with any number of copies of this card in your deck. So if you're building a constructed deck, you could, for example, play 16 copies of Wastes in it if you want to. The other thing it means is that any cards that tell you, say, to search up a basic land or key off of having a basic land will work with Wastes. So if you, say, tap and sacrifice an Evolving Wilds, you could search up a Wastes from your deck and put it onto the battlefield.
Okay, anyone who's been to a Magic tournament lately, or indeed plays on Magic Online, knows that you build your deck and then you go to the Add Basic Lands button or the land table in real life, and you just go, right, I have 9 swamps, I have 7 islands. In the future, do we just click on a button or pick up our 16 Wastes or not?
Great question, Rich. So, no, you will not be able to add any number of Wastes to your deck in Limited. In order to get Wastes that you want to include in your deck, you'll actually have to draft them during the draft portion. So, to that end, we've actually included 2 different copies of Wastes in Oath of the Gatewatch, so it's represented as sort of a double common. It's twice as likely that you'll get Wastes as you'll get any other common in the set.
Okay, do these 2 look exactly the same?
They don't, in fact. They actually have 2 different pieces of artwork.
See?
Yeah, let's take a look at the second one we have here.
Let's take a look.
So these are the 2 different Wastes here, and these represent the 2 different types of destruction wrought on Zendikar by the 2 different Eldrazi Titans, Ulamog and Kozilek. So the one on the left there is Kozilek's Wastes.
Right.
You can see the sort of geometric and iridescent patterns in there.
Right.
And on the right is Ulamog's Waste, the desiccated, bony-like structures there.
That's a stunning idea, whoever came up with that.
Yeah, I think they look absolutely beautiful.
Yeah,
so
they
really
do. So the fact that we've got 2 means that in a booster, because they're double common, if you think that at a typical draft you're going to see between 2 and 3 of any particular common on average taken across many, many drafts, we're going to see much more like 4, 5, 6 of these doing the rounds, and presumably, like many cards, they're going to gravitate towards the players that actually want them.
Yeah, that's exactly true. However, only having 4, 5, 6 Wastes in a draft would not be enough colorless mana to build your mana bases properly to cast and activate these abilities that require colorless mana. So we made sure to include a whole bunch of different ways to add colorless mana to your mana pool. There's a whole slew of new non-basic lands in addition to the 2 basic Wastes that are there, as well as creatures, artifacts, you name it. So there's lots of different ways to produce colorless mana. You have to draft them in order to put them in your deck, but then you'll get to cast powerful spells and activate abilities with colorless mana.
Yeah, and worth remembering, of course, also that we're going to see 2 packs opened of Oath of the Gatewatch, followed by 1 of Battle for Zendikar.
That's right.
Again, that's going to help the Wastes doing the rounds of the table. Well, that's a fantastic way to kick off the kickoff weekend for Oath of the Gatewatch. We've got more previews coming tomorrow and on Sunday. But for now, with the news that we've got Kozilek, the Great Distortion, 12/12, Menace, draw your hand back up to 7, and the arrival of colorless mana in the form of Waste. Ian, thank you so much. And that is our first preview here for Oath of the Gatewatch.